Special Democracy 2020 coverage of the South Carolina primary. I'm your host, Emily Compagno. It's 7:30 on the East Coast, and the Fox News decision desk can now project that former Vice President Joe Biden will decisively win the South Carolina Democratic presidential primary, giving a major boost to his flagging campaign after losses in Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada. Biden will easily defeat Democratic Socialist Bernie Sanders in the Palmetto State, who is currently in second place ahead of billionaire Tom Steyer. Bringing up the rear, we have Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Amy Klobuchar, and Tulsi Gabbard. This will be the first state won by Biden in 3 presidential campaigns, driven in large part by his popularity among African-American voters, who comprise roughly half the voters in South Carolina's Democratic primary, according to the Fox News voter analysis, a survey of 1,500 likely Democratic primary voters in the state. I've got an all-star political panel here with me tonight to break down Biden's big night. Scott Rasmussen, editor-at-large at Ballotpedia, Robert Patillo, Democratic strategist and attorney, and Brad Blakeman, former senior advisor to President George W. Bush. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here tonight. We're really excited about this. What an incredible night for Joe Biden. So why don't we just start with your initial thoughts?
My initial thoughts is that Joe Biden, this was his firewall. He had to do well. He's going to do very well. And I think one of the main reasons he's done so well is because of Jim Clyburn. The fact that he got the endorsement at the right time, and we heard from the exit polls, 1 out of 4 voters turned to that endorsement and said that was very important to them. Otherwise, in primary races and general elections, endorsements really don't mean very much. Here it did.
Interesting.
Well, I think this is proof of why the Democratic Party is going to have to change going forward. That when you have Iowa and New Hampshire's results, and then you have South Carolina results, and there's such a gulf in between. It really explains the difference between those early states in South Carolina and the fact that we have to reshuffle things. Because if, let's say South Carolina was first and Joe Biden came out with 40+% of victory, the entire narrative the last 2 weeks will be completely different versus pushing Bernie Sanders as being the front runner of the race. Now that we're seeing real Americans start voting, not people in Iowa at some weird caucus in a gymnasium at midnight, not these small people in Dickhead's Notch in Iowa, Dicksville's Notch, in New Hampshire voting at midnight. Now that we're doing real one person, one vote, regular voting, we're seeing that Joe Biden is doing very well, and that's going to continue through North Carolina, through Tennessee, Arkansas, Alabama on Super Tuesday, and we're going to have a very different race in 72 hours.
Interesting. Scott, your thoughts?
I think right now we're finally to the place where it's a 2-person race. It is either Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden. Clyburn's announcement and endorsement was obviously a big factor here. And I think in the next 72 hours, you're going to see just a list of endorsements from Democrats saying, we want Joe Biden. They're going to help clarify that choice for voters going forward.
All right, so let's talk about that for a second. So Biden has called this his launching pad, but we know that, for example, CNN came out with 2 polls this week in anticipation of Super Tuesday that the delegate-rich Texas has Sanders leading by 9 points and in California leading by 21. So when we mention the momentum coming out of this, is it really enough, however, to combat Bernie Sanders' kind of undeniable surge at this point? Do you see that it actually would make a difference moving forward for Super Tuesday around the corner?
It will make a difference. None of us know how much. The difference, the impact will be a little bit muted by the fact there's a lot of early voting in those states. Now, if you were to ask about California, is it enough for Joe Biden to make up the difference there? Of course not, but maybe he can dent Sanders' delegate count there a little bit. Is it enough in Texas? It could very well be, because remember, if Mike Bloomberg's totals go down a few points, all of that's going to shift right to Joe Biden. And if the race is now seen as Biden-Sanders, a lot of voters will make that decision.
Do you agree that it would be Bernie versus Biden, or is that a media narrative that Biden would hope to push?
Well, I think that's what Biden's hoping for, because if you look going forward, there's very little justification for Amy Klobuchar to still be in the race. She's more likely going to lose her home state on Tuesday. They're close, but it's very likely she'll lose her home state, and it's difficult to see anywhere on the primary map where she can get a victory. We're past the point of saying a 3rd place or 4th place finish is momentum going forward. forward. The same with Pete Buttigieg, where he might not get an actual win until the Indiana primary. It's difficult to see where he can actually win at. So if they decide to stay in the race, let's say 2016, when Donald Trump was the clear Trumpian force in the race, and they were trying to figure out who would be the establishment figure, you had Rubio and Cruz and other people still in the race splitting that vote, which allowed him to get the nomination. If the other moderates decide to stay in the race despite not having a pathway to victory, including someone like Tom Steyer, who has infinite money, so there's nothing to force him out of the race, Buttigieg, Klobuchar, and then you have the outside force of Bloomberg, you could see Bernie doing exactly what he did in Iowa, getting 25 to 28% of the vote, what he did in New Hampshire, getting 27 or 28% of the vote, and winning versus actually having to get more than half of the electorate, and that's what the Bernie campaign is hoping for.
Brad, your thoughts on that?
Look, with only 3 days to go, it's very tough. And as Scott pointed out, early voting, this is a reason why, early voting is very treacherous. People are voting in the third act. They haven't seen the final act yet. And the final act now, in an important stronghold of South Carolina for Joe Biden, has always said it was South Carolina. It is South Carolina. He did well, but how is that going to translate against states, delegate-rich states, that already have early voting? Now, it's going to be interesting for Biden. What is the press going to do? How are they going to spin it in the next 3 days? You're not going to be able to purchase the kind of earned media that's going to happen. The other thing, as Scott correctly pointed out, you're going to see endorsements, one after the other. Now, if it is a two-person race, why would Clinton be sitting on the fence? Why would even Obama be sitting on the fence? You could have rock stars coming out in the next day or so to really boost Biden. And then it would really be defined. And then after Tuesday, we're going to see a real two-person race because these folks are going to drop out. The Buttigiegs of the world, the Warrens, the Klobuchars. Steyer is not a player. And Bloomberg is not going to be able to beat the momentum of grassroots. You can't purchase that.
So let's drill down on that for a second, the notion of endorsement. So up until now, we've heard nothing but a lot of quiet in the way of people that you would expect to be jumping in. And the kind of common acceptance of that is, well, because we're waiting for the general, right? We're going to see the Democratic Party kind of choose its own, and then we'll support whoever it is. But the reality is that we're also seeing incredible fissures and a civil war, frankly, within the Democratic Party. And so do you predict that there'll be some influential endorsements that will come out for Biden now?
Look, when you have Joe Biden, and we can see from the voters in South Carolina, who say that they're conservative. They're not socialists. Yeah. And as we pointed out, when you get around to one man, one vote, which you're seeing now in the primaries and away from the caucuses and smaller states with a more homogeneous population, I think you're going to see people come out because the definition of the party is going to be defined by their endorsement. And either you're going to go with a Democratic socialist or you're going to go with a tried and true Democrat. And if it goes much further than this, the party's going to be in deep trouble, because if you go to a brokered convention, all hell will break loose.
Right. And Robert, do you predict the same, that there will be people giving Biden that boost, key endorsements between now and Super Tuesday and a little bit afterward?
Well, I think it has to happen, because what Bernie Sanders has been able to get away with doing is for 40 years doing yada, yada, yada. How are you going to pay for Medicare? Yada, yada, yada. How are you going to pay for the Green New Deal? Yada, yada, yada. But when you get down into the South, in particular, what you saw in South Carolina, and Georgia's coming up on the 24th and the other southern states, we've been told a lot of stuff over the years. And I'm a Georgian, I'm a Southerner. And so when you don't explain it, when you seem like you're doing the hidden balls trick, I think one of the most important things that come out of that South Carolina debate was when Pete Buttigieg really pressed Bernie, and Bernie said, well, do you have 2 hours for me to explain how to pay for my health care bill? That's how you know someone's lying to you. And I think that is what's going to be pushed out when you don't have a 5-person or 25-person field where you can really drill down and ask those hard questions. What we saw from the Warren campaign, as a matter of fact, was she finally had to explain how to pay for her Medicare for All plan. Her campaign cratered and never came back. And I think we can see the same thing happening to Bernie.
So you're coming from the pollster background. What did the polls say about what we're predicting here?
Well, the polls in the last week have been showing Joe Mentum, that he has been gaining steadily. Part of that came because of the Bloomberg bomb in that first debate he was in. Guy spends $400 million in ads to look good, and then in 90 minutes he just blows it all. And so all of a sudden, those people who are looking for an alternative to Sanders are looking somewhere else. I do think it's a two-person race, and I do think endorsements will come on top of it. But I think the way it shifts formally is very important. And the reason endorsements will matter early on is because sooner or later you're going to be faced with a choice. Is it Sanders in a brokered convention, which would be a disaster for the party no matter how that works out, or do you try and get a clear winner early on? And look, anybody who comes out right now and endorses Joe Biden is going to incur the wrath of the Bernie team. That's a given. The Civil War is better to be fought for Democrats today, though, than in July.
And let's take a quick check-in with a race board here. So we have Biden in at 51.4%. That race, as we've notified you, has been called. But I wanted to check in. So we have Sanders at 18.2%. We have Steyer at 11.4% and Buttigieg at 7.8%. So here's what's interesting to me. Now, Sanders, as we know, in 2016, he got 26% of the vote. He got less this time around than he did back then. So focusing on him for a second, what changed? I'll start with you, Scott.
Well, first of all, last time around, there was only one other candidate. A lot less choices there. The other thing is he is now the center of attention. When you are the front runner, people pay more attention. I guess my role is to be the Sanders defender on this. You guys are dissing him pretty well. But I do think that he does tap into a core constituency. He believes his Medicare for All plan will save money. So if you ask him how to pay for it, he's going to say, we're going to save money. Yeah. And people will believe that. So that core constituency is very important. But when you're the front runner, people pay more attention to the details. That's what's happening to Sanders right now. And of course, we're still very early. Only 6% of the vote is in. Right. We expect to end up somewhere around the same range from the exit polls. But Bernie Sanders is now in an unusual role. He is the outsider who has been trashing the establishment. We've heard that before, about 4 years ago. He was the front runner, but now people are ganging up on him, and how he responds to that's going to be critical.
And I think Bernie Sanders made one critical mistake in the last 2 weeks, which was the tweet that he sent out where he said, the Republican establishment and the Democratic establishment can't stop me. You're ready to be the nominee of the Democratic establishment. Right. So when you say that the Democratic establishment can't stop me, whether it's telling the people like Clyburn, the people like John Lewis, when you get to the Georgia primary, Andrew Young, when you get to the real gravamon of the Democratic Party, and you're saying you can't stop me, what you were basically doing is challenging the establishment of the party to stop you. And so I think one of the big things that we're going to look at going into the end of the night is, where will Steyer's be in relative to Bernie? Because if Bernie is running neck and neck or even loses to Tom Steyer, that really brings into question what can happen for him in the rest of the South. Because even if you win California, let's say, and you lose the entire South on Super Tuesday, you're going to be in a very close delegate race with Joe Biden. And assuming that after that you get Klobuchar, Buttigieg, and Tulsi Gabbard, and maybe even Bloomberg decides to use his money to support Biden instead of trying to run himself, well, then Bernie puts himself in a very, very precarious situation. When you're already in a fight, you don't really need to pick new fights.
So touching on that endorsement for a second, how would that play into to fundraising? And Bernie has maintained, well, I don't need it. I don't need it from the establishment. But there are plenty of people who say, yes, you do. So how do you think that would play in moving forward? Well, what Robert outlines happens.
People like to go with a winner. Mm-hmm. And if they see that there's blood in the water and that Biden has been resuscitated, the money's going to start to flow. Remember, Biden only spent less than $1 million. And Steyer spent north of $22 million. And Bernie didn't spend wildly in the state. And remember, with the Democrats, you have to have a 15% threshold to even share delegates tonight. So that's going to be very important to see how Steyer and Buttigieg do. We know that Sanders will probably, for sure, he's past the 15% threshold now. That's likely to continue and grow. But here's the good thing about that endorsements bring. One is they bring excitement because the press are going to focus on that. Number two is you get surrogates. You got 14 states. Can you imagine if Obama went to California or to Texas or the Clintons split up for Joe? You've got people now of note going all over the country, which helps in fundraising, but also in enthusiasm and earned media, things you can't buy.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we're all kind of talking about is that if Sanders stumbles at all on Super Tuesday, if he doesn't win most of the states, or if his delegate total isn't overwhelming, it almost doesn't matter even if Bloomberg has picked up some of those, because there will be a clear dent in the armor of the Sanders campaign. The delegate selection process is confusing to most people. It's a 15% of the district and 15% statewide. So they'll be looking at what is the overall trend here. And if coming out of Super Tuesday, Biden begins to win most of the states that are remaining, or Biden does very well in those states, and you end up with nobody getting a majority, it'll be very easy for his defenders to argue that this is the man who should be the nominee. So the delegate counts on Tuesday will be very, very important.
And also on that same point, I think the argument for Biden is going to be the number of states that he wins on Super Tuesday, because I think it's very likely with California, Bernie's going to win California, right, and he's going to have a humongous delegate haul out of that. And he's going to win the northeastern states. He's going to win Massachusetts, and those geographically centralized states, the upper crust Ivy League states. Those are Bernie states. But if Biden is able to rack up in the barbecue belt, if he's able to sweep North Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, Arkansas, those sorts of states, do well in Oklahoma, he can argue look, Bernie won California and he won the upper crust liberal elite. He can run the Trump strategy. Yes, Bernie wins on the coast. He wins the elitist liberal states. But in the real heartland of America, I was able to rack up there. And I think that's going to be the strategy for him. There's really no point in him trying to compete in the California media market right now with Bloomberg raising the rates by buying up every minute of ad time. But I think that's where he will concentrate, racking up in those states in the South.
I got to tell you, I spent 20 years in the Carolinas, but the rest of the country is real America too.
This is true. I have my Southern bias.
We all have ours. So let's touch on that for a second. Going back to Steyer, but touching on the ad buys. Steyer, as you pointed out, so he outspent every other candidate by over 10 times. He spent over $13 million on social media and television ads. And by contrast, Amy Klobuchar spent $8,000. So the argument that is he trying to buy the election, just like the argument says about Bloomberg. But as we see up on the board right now, obviously we only have a certain amount of percentage reporting, but he's at 11.5%. So maybe that buying is working. And what are your thoughts moving forward and out of this? Is he going to keep this up? I'll start with you.
No, look, he can keep it up. He has money to burn. But your return on investment, every businessman has the ROI. Bloomberg's ROI is terrible. Anybody who made these investments would, they'd probably have a conservator appointed to him because they're worried about his mental capacity. But as long as they have money to burn, they can do whatever they want. But it doesn't have an effect. The good news in America is it doesn't matter if you're a billionaire. You're not going to buy the nomination of your party, and you're not going to buy a general election. I think that's clear. The question is, what do they do, and who do they support? Now, the political people, the Buttigiegs of the world, the Warrens, the Klobuchars, if they do get out on Tuesday, what do they do?
Right.
And who do they support? And that's going to be telling, not only leaving the race, but what, if anything, they're going to do, even in an early release of their delegates, saying that we pledged our delegates when we get to the convention to Biden. I don't think that any of the candidates who are in there now are going to join the Sanders camp. I'd be very surprised, but you never know.
Well, let's also understand that Tom Steyer is living his best life. That between yesterday being on stage with Juvenile, performing Back That Thing Up, along with his wife, which was very entertaining. And also earlier in the day, having gospel artist Yolanda Adams on stage with him. I don't think many people can do gospel and Juvenile on the same day. But that definitely has helped him in his percentages going into the race. And I think for Steyer, because he's running on a cause, on a mission, that even if he's not a real player electorally going forward, he does want to keep his voice in the race. And at a certain point, we see billionaires do this all the time, towards the end of their life, start just giving their money away. I think that's a different way of doing it now, what Steyer and Bloomberg are doing. Bloomberg has spent nearly $1 billion so far. That is 1/68th of his wealth. Wow. He's probably made that back in interest since he started spending it. So this money is inconsequential to them.
All right, gentlemen, panel, stand by. I want to go to Fox's Peter Ducey, who is live at the Biden watch party tonight in Columbia, South Carolina. What's the mood in the room tonight?
Emily, the mood has been great since about 7 o'clock when the networks all called Biden as the winner. So there was a big burst of excitement right at the beginning. And ever since, there has been music playing, and now this is our first Joe chant. But people have kind of just been standing around waiting for what's next, and that would be the former vice president, who earlier today was talking about how he thought he was going to win here. He didn't want to guess by how much, but he was indicating that he thought the bigger the margin of victory he had, the bigger bump he could get coming out of South Carolina. And as of right now, from the early numbers, it does look like he got a big margin of victory. So now we'll wait to see if he was right, if he gets a really big bump. Of course, Michael Bloomberg not on the ballot in here. Joe Biden spent a ton of time here in this state where Bloomberg was on TV sometimes, but not out campaigning or hosting events. Many of the other candidates did as well. And something that is notable, one of the last times that we came to the Columbia area for a couple of days was this summer for the Jim Clyburn Fish Fry. Congressman Clyburn is the most influential Democrat in South Carolina. Initially, he was indicating that he was going to stay neutral because he had all the candidates come down here to his fish fry this summer. They were courting him. He didn't make an endorsement then. It seemed like he was going to sit it out, but at the very end, he did come in, and there is a seat marked for him right in the front. So it seems like Clyburn is going to get in on some of the victory this evening, too, and we do expect to see Biden within the next few minutes. Emily?
And Peter, with your boots on ground, first of all, did you know that there was there an air of inevitability about it and within the Biden campaign, other than him saying, look, yes, I have this confidence, I know I'm going to win? Because it seemed like there were so many voters who said, you know what, I'm going to make a game time decision when I vote. So how key then were his 30 endorsements, including Congressman Clyburn, like you just mentioned? How important were those to the voters you've spoken to?
I don't think that there was a feeling of inevitability, because earlier this week at the debate, the Biden campaign held a meeting with some reporters and gave us some background information, and they were talking about how they would consider second place here in South Carolina a victory for them. So it seemed like they were really managing expectations in the days after Bernie Sanders rattled off 2 state victories in a row. And a lot of people were surprised when they said they would be okay with second place, because at some point you have to win something if you are going to be the nominee for your party. But the dozens of endorsements might not have made a big difference, but it does seem like the Clyburn one did. Emily?
Thank you so much, Peter Ducey. Enjoy the celebration over there. It sounds like it's getting pretty exciting. Okay, so what do we think about that? So now it's the margin of victory, right? And obviously that's going to be rolling, and we're going to learn more. And as you pointed out, so 1 in 4 voters have reported thus far that one endorsement made a big difference. But interestingly, and we touched on this earlier, Bernie Sanders got the next largest block. So it kind of plays into the narrative of Bernie versus Biden, but also we know that there's a large conservative block in that state. So how is it that Bernie is getting such a boost?
Well, I'll let my southern friend.
The real people.
Well, let's also understand that South Carolina is an open primary, and by them not having a Republican primary right now, what you're seeing is a large internet movement for Republicans in South Carolina to vote for Bernie, because they believe that Bernie will have the best chance of losing 48 states to Donald Trump. So there's a huge push among Republicans in South Carolina to support Bernie, and also, South Carolina has a lot of colleges. College students, for the most part, are big fans of Bernie's agenda. Before you have real bills, everything for free sounds like a good idea. So Bernie does a great job of motivating college kids with the Medicare for All, free college tuition, free this, free that, free the other, paid for by magic. And I think because of that, Bernie will do good in places like Columbia, South Carolina, Orangeburg, areas such as that. So I think that is really going to be, it's going to be interesting looking at the map coming out of it, seeing what percentage of crossover votes happen for Bernie, and also what percentage of the youth vote he gets.
So in the exit polls show that about half of Biden supporters don't like Sanders, and about half of Sanders voters don't like Biden. What you're seeing is it is becoming a 2-person race, but it's really reflecting 2 different theories of the one thing Democrats agree on, which is how do we beat President Trump. The Biden supporters, or the Biden, Bloomberg, Klobuchar supporters, they're saying we need to win back those voters who voted for Barack Obama, the Midwestern states, the forgotten voters. We need to find a way to appeal to them. The Sanders voters are saying, forget them. They're going to die soon anyhow. We just need to, we need a revolution. We need to change things. And you talk about this, and both sides passionately believe their model of how you beat Donald Trump. And that's why it becomes, we have two representatives of it, but that's where the battle is.
And I want to talk about turnout too. So we saw coming up into South Carolina that the absentee voters, they exceeded 2016 by over 50% as of Thursday. So that's a lot of kind of galvanizing happening. But then there's also the risk of voter depression if, I think to me, Bernie Sanders is the wild card. So if those 93 delegates that we've heard that might hesitate, that might push back, you know what, we're going to go with the majority versus plurality. There's a lot of wild cards in this. So that type, again, of voter surging, will we see it become depressed? And if so, why? I'll start with you.
Well, I think it all depends what happens on Tuesday and going forward. Are people going to be satisfied that Joe Biden has come off the mat and is back in a big way and he can vote? Now, from what we've seen by voter turnout, this hasn't been historic in any of the caucuses or primaries. We haven't seen the kind of turnout that we've seen. And if I were writing Bernie's speech tonight, I would say, but for the billionaire, Steyer, being in this race, we would have been more competitive than we were. And it's true. Steyer bought his 11.3% so far. And Bloomberg's nowhere to be seen. We'll see him on Tuesday. So it remains to be seen how well people believe, and we'll know in the next day or so how it's spun, whether Joe Biden is back. But clearly, I would say, as a Republican, Joe Biden's back.
All right, hold this thought for a moment. Panel, stand by. I'm going to bring in Joe Concha, media reporter for The Hill. Joe, your response to Biden's big win tonight?
I think it changes nothing, actually, Emily. You know, he is still the same candidate he has been for the past year or so, which is he a competent candidate? Is he a coherent guy who makes very valid points? What is, and I challenge anybody on the panel, you go into an elevator for 15 seconds. What is Joe Biden running on exactly? What is his message? I know what it was with Obama, and I know what it was with Trump. With Joe Biden, I have zero idea. And at least with Bernie Sanders, there is authenticity. He has been the same guy for 40 years. Joe Biden, I have no idea, still to this day, who he is. And he put a lot of resources into South Carolina. I get that. He should have won here, and he did. He won bigger than a lot of people probably thought he would, and that gives him some momentum, I guess, until he actually, speaks again and says something that is profoundly awkward, right? Where he says he's going to appoint the first African-American woman to the United States Senate, or that he's actually running for the United States Senate. He is not very good at being a candidate, and the fact that he's been running for president since the 1980s, and this is the first time he has won a primary or a caucus, tells me a lot. So all of that said, does the race change? I guess it does, but at the same time, I just don't think that this makes Joe Biden a better candidate with a clear message of optimism in any capacity or any sort of message whatsoever going forward.
So a key endorsement that he got was House Majority Whip James Clyburn, who said that part of the reason that he was endorsing him was because he didn't campaign at all. He said, look, I see him and his wife all the time and they're eating in diners. They're here, they're part of the community. They're not, as he said, politicking. So how does that play into the fact that if Biden can go anywhere, he needs to harness this momentum, this launching pad, as he called it? What cohesive campaign, as you said, if you can't even identify what he stands for and he's getting an endorsement because he's not campaigning, where does this leave him moving forward?
I'm not sure, Emily. He hasn't done many interviews at all in terms of a national level, right, where he has to sit down, take a tough interview. He will tomorrow with Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday, and I'm curious to see how that goes. That'll be very interesting. Yeah, I just don't know. I know that at least with Bernie Sanders, you know what you're getting. I get that it's socialism, and that's probably a very bad thing, and that's why the Democratic establishment, is completely and totally against him winning the nomination. But I'm not sure Joe Biden is the best answer either. And then I looked at Michael Bloomberg, and tomorrow he is actually buying 3 minutes of airtime on CBS and NBC to talk about how he would have led the coronavirus, much like, when you put out an ad saying that he was the guy who led New York through 9/11, except that Mayor Giuliani at the time. It was Rudy Giuliani who was mayor of New York at that time and not Michael Bloomberg. So for Democrats, I'm still panicked at this point at the fact that the killer bees, whether it's Bloomberg, whether it's Biden, or whether it's Bernie, are your three top candidates, and each are fundamentally flawed to take on Donald Trump at this point. The only wild card, Emily, is coronavirus and what happens from here in terms of where it spreads, how many people are actually killed by it as a result, and the president's handling of it. I see that as a wild card. If that did not exist, I would say Donald Trump is very much on track to win re-election. But right now, things are very much up in the air because of that virus.
And Joe, last question. So you mentioned Bloomberg. He wasn't on the ballot there in South Carolina, but obviously he's a busy bee himself, purchasing ad buys for the future. But compare that with Steyer, who outspent the other candidates in South Carolina over tenfold, and he's now in third place, frankly, to show for it. He is 11.6% with the precincts reporting. So what do you make of him, and what do you project that he's going to do? Is he going to hang on forever, sort of hoarding his own money, spending it on himself? Or as we discussed earlier with the panel, should he give up, get off the pot, and then put this kind of clear result from his investment toward another candidate?
Emily, I like the fact that you took that saying and made it give up and get off the pot. So good job, you. You're on the internet, so you could have said it if you wanted to. Hey, look, as far as Steyer, I mean, if there's a more profoundly annoying candidate, I think even the Democrats constantly, every 3 seconds at every answer during the debates, the waving of the hand and taking over these things. And he spent a lot of money, and that got him third place in South Carolina. And I would hope that his ego does not keep him in here, because his money can, right? He could go right through Super Tuesday. He probably will, right? He's not going to drop out tomorrow or Monday. He'll stay through Super Tuesday. He'll suffer, overwhelming losses from there. And then hopefully he drops out. And we never have to hear from him again, because, again, I have zero idea really what he was running on outside of the fact that it got him on TV a lot. And that was a lot of Democratic candidates, right? And we've had over 20. So we'll see what happens from here. But Super Tuesday will be very interesting, because Michael Bloomberg has bought a lot of ads in a lot of states that make him very competitive. And I think what we're headed towards, and I'd love to hear what the panel has to say, and I'm sure you're going to talk about it, are we headed now towards a brokered convention? If Joe Biden does well enough during Super Tuesday, Bernie Sanders doesn't pull away, and Michael Bloomberg is always there, he's not going to drop out anytime soon with all the ads that he's buying. I think we are, and I think that, from an entertainment perspective, hey, great. But at the same time, if you're a Democrat, it's the last thing you want to see against a Donald Trump who has a lot of money right now, and outside of coronavirus, a lot of momentum in terms of a lot of things going for him.
Joe Concha, media reporter for The Hill. I always love your insight. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Go Raiders, Emily. Las Vegas.
Always.
Just saying.
All right, so let's go to Fox's Mark Meredith, who is live in Virginia Beach with the Sanders campaign. What are they saying about Biden's victory in South Carolina?
Emily, we're going to be hearing from the senator any moment now. He's going to be taking the stage right here behind me. It's going to be unclear whether or not he'll congratulate Joe Biden on his apparent victory in South Carolina. But I think it's clear to say that the Sanders campaign was not expecting to win the state, because, after all, they're here in Virginia, not in South Carolina, as those votes are being counted. We also saw this happen last week when Sanders did win in Nevada. He decided to skip out and head to Texas to campaign. So the Sanders campaign has been doing this as these contests have been wrapping up, moving on to the next states. In fact, Bernie Sanders, Emily, he's not even sticking around in Virginia much longer. They vote here on Tuesday, but Sanders tonight, he'll be flying out west. He's going to be holding 2 events in California tomorrow. Then Monday, he's got stops in Utah and then Minnesota, and then he'll be in his home state of Vermont for Super Tuesday for that election night. So certainly we've seen Bernie Sanders' campaign trying to make sure that they put as much time, blood, sweat, and tears out on the campaign trail as they can. The senator has had multiple events today, and events just like this one where thousands of people have shown up to hear from him. He was in Boston. He was in Springfield, Virginia. The senator also hammering home on some of his most popular talking points, if you will, from the campaign when it comes to taking on President Trump, even taking on what he says is the Democratic establishment, saying that he believes they are nervous with his campaign, but he also says, look at the supporters, the people that have been coming out here time and time again, even from 4 years ago. And it's interesting, in Virginia 4 years ago, Bernie Sanders did not win against Hillary Clinton. The Sanders campaign, though, certainly tried to see this as a different outcome this time around, Emily.
So from numbers that we're seeing thus far, he's getting less than he got in 2016, but it sounds like the excitement there is palpable. It sounds like you wouldn't know from being there. Is there any type of articulation or addressing of that from the boots on ground?
From the campaign itself, I think they are just getting ready for the senator to make his comments. In terms of whether or not the enthusiasm is there, it's a cold day out in Virginia Beach, but these people waited for hours out in the cold just for the chance to get in. They've even set up some overflow rooms. So if you were to ask about what's really the enthusiasm here, this really does almost feel kind of like a Trump rally in the sense you have these people that are fired up, that they've waited in line, and that they are eager to hear from the campaign. Even some of the risers and the music sounded somewhat familiar. But it's been very interesting to talk to the folks that have been out here. These are people that say that they are fed up with the establishment politics that we've seen over the last several years, that they feel that Bernie Sanders would be the best person to be able to take that on. As for what Sanders will do after this South Carolina win for Joe Biden, it's anybody's guess. But as we talked about, he's got multiple events still in the schedule, so it doesn't look like he's going anywhere. Emily?
Mark, Meredith, thank you so much. All right, so panel, we have a lot to discuss. So what I want to start with, though, actually is, Bernie and the Bernie bros got a lot of flack for what he said, for example, to Mayor Pete after Nevada, and he certainly didn't display a cordiality to the other campaigns. So now we're hearing, he knew he was going to lose South Carolina. They have all this momentum. What do we think that we're going to hear from him moving forward towards the other candidates?
I don't think Sanders is gracious at all. I don't expect him to be tonight. The fact is, as Scott pointed out earlier, it was a lot different when it was a two-person race 4 years ago than it is tonight. There are other people who he feels are taking votes away from him, and if they would just get out, he would be doing so much better. So I don't expect him to be gracious towards Biden. He has too much riding in 3 days. I think he's going to be talking about, taking this to Joe on Super Tuesday, and certainly talking about California, which is his next stop, and how delegate rich it is. And the fact is that he's done more work out there than Joe Biden has done, because Joe Biden has been concentrating on South Carolina. So I think that I don't expect Sanders to be very nice to anybody. But the good thing is, as far as Virginia is concerned, is Senator Warner, U.S. Senator, has endorsed Biden. So I think that, again, when you get those surrogates who have connections to those important states on Tuesday, it certainly helps.
And also Tim Kaine also endorsed Biden recently also. And I think this goes to kind of the core of concerns that Democrats have about Bernie Sanders being at the top of the ticket, which is he's been the exact same person for the last 40 or 50 years. And the problem with that is that he's been the exact same person for the last 40 or 50 years. And so because of his lack of cordiality, his lack of being able to get things done in the United States Senate, not even being able to work across party lines, being able to work within the party to do anything besides rename mailboxes and post offices around the country. If you're Doug Jones in Alabama, the idea of Bernie Sanders being at the top of the ticket must be frightening as hell. If you're Jamie Harrison in South Carolina running a good race against Lindsey Graham, and the Democratic debate is arguing between communism and socialism, the differences, and who has the most stents in their heart and who's had the most heart attacks, well, then you must be thinking to yourself, we got to get out of this, the twilight zone. Or even McGrath running against Mitch McConnell in Kentucky. You have two Senate races in Georgia where you have Raphael Warnock, who's going to be going against Doug Collins or Kelly Loeffler. You have Teresa Tomlinson, who's going to be running against David Perdue. You have competitive Democratic races in the Senate across the country. And what most people think is that because of the temperament of Bernie Sanders, his inability to work across party lines, his inability to work intra-party, his inability to raise funds from outside of his base of the Bernie bros and to bring in swing voters and moderate voters, the fear is even if he was to win somehow, then you're going to give Mitch McConnell 62 votes in the Senate and give the House of Representatives back to the Tea Party. So what exactly is the point? So I think that is the fear and why you're seeing more of the establishment coalesce around Biden and kind of come back home. It's almost like chicken noodle soup. When you're sick, you don't want to eat sushi. You don't want to have a kale salad. You want to go with what's warm, what's comfortable, and what you know. And that's what Joe Biden, to the question of what Joe Biden is running on, that is what he's running on.
But recently we've heard, for example, from Nancy Pelosi, she's softening her rhetoric about Bernie Sanders. So I almost feel like, is there an inevitability to this? Is she trying to prepare herself in case Bernie Sanders is in fact at the top of the ticket, that the Democratic Party will have to rally around him, that they will somehow have to downplay what frankly is a radical socialism output?
Well, I think when you say Nancy Pelosi is softening her rhetoric, she gave one-word answers to the New York Times. Yes, we can keep the House. I mean, it was it was not exactly a glowing comfort level with Senator Sanders. I think there's two sides of the Sanders thing. The positive side for the Democrats is he does connect with some people. He does have a message, and there is a chance that he could find a message that resonates and that he could be a serious challenge to President Trump. You look at all the issue positions and other things. It's hard to see where that is, but he might find his voice in a specific way, and he does have the same authenticity because he has been saying the same thing for 40 years. But there's a history lesson from 40 years ago that is the reason the Democrats should be nervous even if Joe Biden is leading. In 1980, President Jimmy Carter was running for re-election. Senator Ted Kennedy was horrified at that, so he ran against him. The convention was here in New York. I was there. It was very close, but President Carter came into the convention with a majority of the pledged delegates. So he was obviously going to be the winner, except said Senator Kennedy, the very first vote of that convention, he challenged the rules. He wanted the convention delegates to be freed from their pledges because he was convinced they would all vote for him. And the speech that Kennedy gave at that convention was less than gracious. The fear among Democrats is that if it's close all the way to the end and Biden does win, that Senator Sanders would play that role, and it was very, very divisive within the party.
You don't look old enough to have been there in person.
Oh, I keep talking like that.
Well, let's dive a little deeper on that, though. So, some argue that what the Democrats have on their hand, though, is a basic math problem. And regardless of potential for endorsements and potential establishment pushing for Biden moving forward, now that he does have, for the first time, a win under his belt, that when it comes down to it, the plurality and maybe a majority will be Bernie Sanders, and that you can't ignore what's coming down the pike for states.
So, first of all, if Bernie Sanders recovers on Tuesday and has a big, big night, yeah, it's all over. I mean, there is no math around that. If Senator Sanders wins if he wins in the South, he wins other places, he is going to be the nominee. On the other hand, if Joe Biden has a good night, 2 weeks from tonight, the biggest state on the primary list will be Florida. I believe Joe Biden would win there. He would begin to chip away at the delegates, and then the Klobuchars and Buttigieg's and Bloomberg's of the world, who have a few scattered delegates, all of a sudden are thinking we're in a position to have some influence here as you head into the convention. So it really comes down to, can Joe Biden turn today's success into a big success on Tuesday night? And if he wins a lot of southern states, he will be close enough in the delegates to make it very competitive all the way to the end.
Can you weigh in on the southern states coming around the corner?
Oh, absolutely. And let's understand, coming into tonight, despite Bernie's 3 wins, he had 46 delegates. Walking in the door tonight, 56 delegates were at stake just in South Carolina. And depending on what the ending numbers are, Joe Biden might walk away with 34 to 40 delegates tonight, depending on how things walk out. Walking in the door 15 when he came in, he's going to be neck and neck delegate-wise with Bernie going into Super Tuesday. It might be 5 to 10 delegates separating them. So then you have to look at the fact, going to your point about Florida, Bernie Sanders, just for no apparent reason, pissed off all of South Florida by complimenting Cuba and Castro. Like, why? Why exactly would you do this?
He was trying to help the Trump campaign.
Yeah, you're going into a very close election where Florida, since the year 2000, has always been a toss-up state at the end. And for completely no reason known to man, it doesn't help you in any state to compliment Castro. You anger a big swath of South Florida. So this is what Democrats are concerned about. We can talk about Biden's gaffes, and Biden's gaffes are kind of like funny grandpa gaffes. You forgot what country you were in. You got into a fight with some guy named Corn Pop. It's kind of funny. Bernie's gaffes are, hey, Castro wasn't that bad of a person, had a good educational system. Those are bigger gaffes, and I think those can lose you entire elections, those sorts of gaffes. So going into the South, going into the Super Tuesday states, going into Georgia on March 21st or 24th, I think you're going to see a real solidification around Biden. I think even if Bernie, because remember, we have to get to 1,991 delegates to win. Bernie's at 46 right now. I think even if he does very well in California, if he does very well in Texas, if Biden is able to get the majority of delegates in the other states, particularly throughout the South, if he's able to win Amy Klobuchar's state of Minnesota, if he's able to win those later states of Florida coming up thereafter, Georgia coming up at the end of the month, then you're going to have very close delegate math. And I do think even going into a convention, if it's 52-48 Bernie, then that's where you're going to get into rounds of voting based on Democratic rules. So Bernie has to put himself in a position where he goes in, even if he doesn't have a majority, with an overwhelming lead. He needs to be going in at 1,500, 1,700 pledged delegates in order to make it a close competition. But if he's at 1,200 and Biden's at 900, then we're going to get into a very interesting convention.
And he needs to be opening that lead as it goes into the convention.
Absolutely.
You know,
he has to be picking up steam going downhill.
Right. And Brett, I want to bring you in on something too that, when we talk about gaffes, you can phrase it like Robert did, or that's a great perspective. You can also argue that Biden's gaffes lead to his inability to serve, his inability to function that we need and require of a commander-in-chief, and that Bernie's gaffes are an indication of an ideology and a commitment to it, an unwavering commitment to an ideology that doesn't necessarily fit with our country's ideals. So given your perspective, your history as an advisor to the George W. Bush administration, how do those play fundamentally with voters and what they can expect from an administration flowing from these guys?
Well, first of all, Bernie's statements are not gaffes. They're statements of policy. This is what he believes. Joe Biden's are gaffes. And there's a material gaffe, something that goes to the ability to serve, and there's an immaterial one. Forgot what city I'm in. Politicians do that all the time. I think both have problems. I think Biden has a serious problem with whether or not he's fit to serve, and I think Sanders certainly has a problem materially with his stance on basic fundamentals of American philosophy. We are a capitalist system. We are not, I don't think Democrats, especially in South Carolina, would deem themselves to be socialist Democrats. But the Democratic Party has a bigger problem than that. Bernie's going to get enough of the delegates to be a player in the platform. And even if he doesn't get the nomination, he's not going silently into the night with his followers. You're going to see a battle royale for the heart and soul of the Democratic Party. They're going to want it in blood, if it's Biden, what exactly their platform is. Every plank of that platform, Bernie and his bros are going to try and influence. And Joe Biden is going to have a noose around his neck with regard to the party platform. He is now bound, or will be bound, by a platform that wouldn't have been his, but for the fact that Sanders is a player up until and through the convention. So you don't get to give your acceptance speech until the platform has been fully baked and served to the convention. So I think the real contest to watch is going to be the platform committee of the Democratic Party, because that's going to define them in the 90-day lead up to the general election.
Okay, panel, stand by. I'm going to check back in with Fox's Peter Ducey, who is live at the Biden Watch Party tonight in Columbia, South Carolina, where the former vice president is set to speak at any moment. Peter.
And Emily, this will be his first victory speech that he's ever given as a presidential candidate in his 3 attempts at a higher office. And they did just finally turn off the TV that had been broadcasting some of the returns that were coming in and the results. So we do expect him to be here any minute in this venue that is really filled up. It's this is where the South Carolina Gamecocks volleyball team plays their home games and practices, and there are now a couple hundred people here. There's been some live music playing, and there have been staffers going around trying to get the crowd into some chants. They even had at one point a T-shirt toss. So there are many more people who are sitting in the stands right now in Joe Biden 2020 gear right now than there were about an hour and a half ago. And really for the last hour and a half, there has not been much going on. There was a lot of excitement right at 7 o'clock when you got the unusual call of the race the second that the polls closed. And now people are just kind of standing or sitting around waiting for Joe. Emily?
So Peter, it seems like the celebration is kind of larger than normal in that this is really the first time in almost in decades, frankly, that Biden has enjoyed a win. It must be exceptionally sweet. Talk to me about how the campaign is talking about momentum coming out of this and what they have next in store. He had redeployed, if I'm correct, 50 staff members to the state of South Carolina. Clearly that worked, in addition to some key endorsements. So are they going to now be on red eyes back to the West Coast and immediately boots on ground for the upcoming Super Tuesday?
Well, he was in Super Tuesdays, North Carolina earlier today, and he's going to spend Super Tuesday in California. I believe that he's also got some stops in Texas that have been added over the weekend. And the campaign today, it was very interesting. The remarks that they had him reading in North Carolina were about how that was a state that helped Barack Obama win in 2008 and in 2012, and they are really trying to stress that now, with a win on the board, what Barack Obama did could possibly happen again. Something, though, that it just kind of goes to show how much money is being spent in the race, and it could have an impact. Bloomberg has spent $500 million, and he has not competed yet. Joe Biden today was bragging about how he thinks that he has enthusiasm behind his campaign because they've been making $1 million a day for the last week or so. That is a lot of money by any measure, but when you compare it to the amount that has been spent by a candidate who has not even appeared on a ballot, except for some early ballots, obviously, in the Super Tuesday states, there's a big difference. Money does not necessarily get you elected, but it also certainly does not hurt. And so the Biden campaign, looking forward, is just going to try to do what they did tonight. But again, remember, it was the day of the New Hampshire primary, and they bailed on New Hampshire to come here. They did put, to your point, all the eggs in this basket, and it worked. So now they move on and try to figure out where else they can pick their spots. Emily?
Peter Ducey, thank you for that. Quick last question. So from the beginning, from out of the gate, Joe Biden has really tethered his horse to the fact that he was, as he calls him, Barack's vice president, right? And that was supposed to be a big deal. And yet the rest of the country noticed that former President Obama did not endorse him, has stayed quiet. And so there was sort of some criticism of why he kept referencing it when it didn't seem to really levy anything other than name recognition. Now that they are again reminding voters of then Senator Barack Obama's trajectory, has it resonated at all with voters there? Did it make a difference? Did it seem to have an impact, Peter?
Not here in South Carolina, and now they're really just focusing on essentially battleground states. They're going back into the same kind of places where President Trump keeps popping up because he can and he's not running in a primary. The general election places like North Carolina today, and stressing it in that way. But in the primary, because Obama was on the sideline, he really was not much of a factor despite what the campaign was saying about him.
Peter Ducey, thank you so much. We will check back in with you later tonight for sure. All right, now in our first look at a majority black electorate, Biden won among African Americans by a wide margin. Look at this. Biden carried this group by more than 20 points, followed by billionaire Tom Steyer, who outspent the other candidates, reminder, tenfold. He spent a little over $13 million in social media and television ad campaigns, and Senator Bernie Sanders. No one else even got above 6%. So we have Biden at 49%, Steyer at 22%, and Sanders at 19%. And interestingly, it correlates as well to some of the key endorsements with the African American community and politicians, with Biden having collected about 30 key endorsements, and Bernie was the second most, and then Steyer had 7. And now let's go to some single issues. So we have support among, so we have that 49, 22, and 19. And then we have that Democratic primary voters in the Palmetto State say Biden's the candidate who can best handle issues related to race. We have that by 33%, Bernie at 21%, Steyer again at 16%. And interestingly, Elizabeth Warren in 4th place with 9% of those key voters. So gentlemen, let me get your thoughts on this right now. So actually, if we could go back to that first screen. So we have the actual support. One more back. Thank you so much. So we have support among academic. So we do. So this is about half of the Democratic Party voters, are between 50 and 60%. They also comprise the most conservative of the Democratic bloc. So I'll start with you, Brad. Your thoughts on Joe Biden's 49% support among African American voters in South Carolina tonight?
Solid, and they were with him from the beginning, and even through troubled waters, they stayed with him. The older black voters were for Joe Biden. The younger, from what we're hearing from the exit polls, Bernie Sanders. But the older black voters came out in huge numbers today. And the question is now, is Joe going to be able to follow that through in other places to match this kind of number? It's going to be a hard act to follow with this kind of support, but certainly out of all the candidates, Joe Biden, I think, is doing the best amongst this bloc.
You know, I've run a lot of campaigns since I was 16 working on campaigns, and anytime people depend on the youth vote, they lose.
Correct.
Because, you know, you can go back to Rock the Vote, Vote or Die, any of the others. What we will always learn is the first thing you want to do is go organize the old folks' homes, the senior high-rises. You bring your absentee ballots out and you talk to the seniors. Do you know why? Because they vote every single election. Dog catcher, local county commissioner primary, they vote every election. Young people, they attend rallies, they love swag bags, they love t-shirts and signs and stuff, and then they forget to vote on election day. So what the Biden campaign did was what all smart campaigns do. You organize the people who vote first, and then you try to come get the other people. And what we saw with Biden also is that by having realistic solutions, when you're talking to adults, so when you're talking to seniors, elderly voters, you can't come with this grab bag of just magical beans that you think are going to convince them. When older black voters hear you talking about government housing, we think Watts. When you start talking about government, the government will provide your basic needs, like Bernie is saying, you know, you think about Reagan and government cheese and those sorts of things, and that's not a compelling message to older African American voters. So what Biden had, not just being seen as his connection to Barack Obama, but also having policy solutions that seem realistic and that can actually happen, and not just this grab bag of magical things that will just fix everything immediately. Because guess what? What Bernie never answered was the question of, if you have all these great ideas and you've been in office this long, why haven't you passed anything? And he's yet to answer that question.
Quick pushback on that. So Tom Steyer, however, is second with 22%, but he has articulated some pretty radical policies. He's not moderate by any stretch of the imagination. So other than his expenditure on an ad campaign, why do you think that he garnered such a high such a high support among the African American population in South Carolina?
McDonald's stopped trying to have a good hamburger 50 years ago. What McDonald's figured out is if you keep running commercials about or disgusting hamburgers, then people will keep buying the hamburgers without having to have better hamburgers. And so what Tom Steyer did was a very similar strategy, which is talking about reparations, talking about other things that sound good on paper, but never articulating how he would actually do them, and then just banging it into people's heads with commercials and ad buys and buying black radio ads, sending canvassers out, knocking on doors, hiring some of the really great political talent in South Carolina to run his campaign there. So he ran a great campaign, but at the end of the day, people don't want your nasty hamburger. And that's what Tom Steyer found out, that it'll get you to a point, but won't get you over the hump.
So that's pretty interesting, given that, you know, from a Democratic standpoint, literally the future of the party is at stake, the future of this country. Like, to listen to certain people, we are almost at Armageddon, and yet you can just buy your way in, and you can, money talks. So these campaign managers, the boots on ground, they're up for sale just like everything else.
You know, we're having this discussion. When I look at those poll results you put up a moment ago, 49% of the African American vote in South Carolina going to Joe Biden. If you had asked any of the three of us the day before the Iowa caucuses what we thought would happen in South Carolina, we'd say Joe Biden will get about half the African American vote.
Yeah.
So what it suggests is maybe things were a little more stable here. Maybe what has been wrong has been all the political commentary in between Iowa and today. And yes, Steyer can spend $19 million to get 11% of the vote in South Carolina. He can target it on some issues. You know, about 18% of Americans support reparations at this point in time. So, you know, yes, you can appeal and get a niche, but you can't buy the presidency. You can buy yourself onto a debate stage. We've had two candidates who've done that. you can buy yourself some attention, but sooner or later you have to perform and deliver in a bigger way. And that, by the way, to me is a little bit encouraging. If you can spend $500 million and not win the presidency, that's a good sign for America.
And just real quick point, I think one thing that that is concerning is the fact that because people like Tom Steyer and Bloomberg were able to simply just reach into their back pocket and unload a water hose of money, we see Steyer, that should be Cory Booker's picture right there, or Kamala Harris's picture right there. People who are actually political professionals who got on the ground early, who campaigned, who did all the hard work over the summer in order to be a viable candidate. And the fact that Tom Steyer can just kind of show up with a bag of money and be in third place, I think that is concerning for Democratic rules going forward.
But yet Buttigieg is up there, and Buttigieg, you know, he worked it very hard. So no, I don't agree with that. I think that Steyer bought his way. Everybody understands how he got here. Same thing with Bloomberg. There's no mystery as to why these people are there. And the reality is you can't buy grassroots support.
But the other thing here is that just because it's a Democratic primary, we do have to point out it's Donald Trump's fault. I mean, the reason Steyer was here and the reason Bloomberg is here is because they think if Trump can do it, anybody can do it. Right. The mindset was, I'm a better person than Donald Trump. I'm richer than he is. If he can figure out a way to get elected, I can too. What they ignored was that President Trump did have a message that connected with a substantial segment of the American public that was being ignored by the establishment in both political parties. Donald Trump was also a TV star. He hosted a reality show. He was a product of the culture.
So I'm going to just cut us off for a second here. Bernie Sanders has started speaking. Let's go to him. Take a listen.
And I believe very strongly that the people of this country on Super Tuesday and after are going to support our campaign because we are more than a campaign, we are a movement. We are a multi-generational movement. I'm the young person. We've got some old people too. We are a multi-racial movement. And we are a movement of millions of people who demand economic justice in this country, demand social justice and the end of racism and all forms of discrimination, and who demand environmental justice as well. We are a movement of millions of people who are sick and tired of the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality in America. We are tired of a handful of billionaires controlling the economic and political life of this nation. And we will create an economy and a government that work for all of us, not just the 1%. And that is what this campaign is about. This campaign understands that in order to defeat Donald Trump, and we have to be very clear about it, can't mince words about it. In order to defeat Trump, we are going to need the largest voter turnout in the history of this country. And in my view, old-fashioned politics, the same old type of politics that doesn't excite anybody, that doesn't energize anybody, that is not going to be the campaign that beats Trump. In order to beat Trump, what we are going to have to do is speak to millions of working class people who today are working 2 or 3 jobs. They're worried about their kids, they're worried about their retirement, they can't afford health care, and they are saying, who cares about me? Who is worried about me? I've seen candidates run to billionaires' homes to raise money. Is anybody worried about me and my kids? And our job together is to reach out to those working people and say, you know what, we do care about you. Join us. Come on into our movement. And then we've got to reach out to the young people in this country. The young people in America today, and I'm proud to say this, they are the most progressive generation of young people in the history of this country.
All right, we've been talking all night about key endorsements and also money. So in a couple of minutes, one of the bees, Biden is going to be giving his victory speech. So in this 2 minutes that we have, I would love to get your thoughts on the fact that with Bloomberg, endorsements and money are wedded together. So he got a lot of key, for example, mayoral endorsements that he still has because he has funded significant programs. We've talked about the tendrils throughout the country. He's the key example of that. So of course he wasn't on the ballot. He did not campaign there. What are your thoughts as to our discussions about endorsements and his bankroll for Bloomberg moving forward?
Bloomberg is not going to be able to buy the kind of endorsements that he's going to need because I think the big guns are the ones that are going to make the news and they're going to rock the world. If a Barack Obama comes out, a Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton or President Clinton come out for Joe Biden, it doesn't matter who Bloomberg has because they're not going to have the star power. Biden now needs star power in the next 3 days. He's got to show that he's got the top A-list behind him. Bloomberg's endorsements are many, but they're at such a, I wouldn't even put them at B-listers.
London Breed, San Francisco mayor.
I think.
Important in California, would you argue?
But again, where we agree that probably Biden is clear is not going to probably win California. So you go to the places where it actually means something. And again, it goes back to the math.
Right.
You have to do the math. Why compete in California? Why seek an endorsement when it's really not going to get you anywhere? You've got to concentrate on the places where you're competitive and where is delegate rich for you to amass those delegates that you're going to need to get to that number.
Robert, your perspective briefly on that, but if Biden doesn't get star endorsements in the next few days, weigh in on Bloomberg, the endorsements, and his finances.
Well, I think Bloomberg's, the endorsements will be more powerful if they weren't so transparent. If it wasn't so obvious that he was just buying black politicians across the country and literally just going into cities, dropping off bags of money and then picking up key endorsements, I think they will be more powerful. But when you have Mayor Nutter, who disagreed with literally every single thing that Bloomberg did while they were neighboring mayors, and then all of a sudden you're endorsing him, or key surrogate, or even Mayor Bowser, the former mayor of Baltimore, so on and so forth, where it's just very obvious what he's doing. And I think people see directly through that. It's like when you see the really short guy, he gets into, but he gets into like, no pun intended, but you see the short fat guy get into the luxury sports car with the beautiful girl with him. You don't think that girl really loves him. And that's the way these endorsements look for Bloomberg going into Super Tuesday. And I think that genuine affection and grassroots support, even without an Obama or a Clinton endorsement for Biden, I think that's what he's going to depend on, because Biden fundamentally has been there. Leslie Jones had the best take on this on Saturday Night Live about a year ago, where she said, oh my God, that's Obama's granddad. And that's the way a lot of people see Bloomberg, or see Biden going into the election, that he has that connection. He's Uncle Joe. He's somebody that you know. He's not going to have these, everything Bernie just said in 30 seconds is the reason I'll never vote for Bernie. And I think a lot of people see that and they feel the exact same way.
You know, when you talk about Bloomberg's endorsements, when he gave that money, especially in his gun control efforts, the recipients really appreciated them. They thought, Bloomberg is a great guy. We really appreciate his support. He probably was deluded by that. They really like me. Of course they want me to be president. And I think that was part of his misreading. He was buying his good graces with those people for an agenda, and they would still be appreciative of him in every way if he was supporting that agenda. So would the South Carolina voters if he was supporting that agenda. But when it comes to then transparently using those connections to get endorsements, no, paid endorsements aren't worth anywhere near as much as heartfelt endorsements.
It seemed, however, that it wasn't necessarily Bloomberg, that there was a puppet master that was operating him. We saw that it seemed like the establishment kind of started to recede away from Biden as he started to make these more significant gaffes and realized that the voter bloc, other than name recognition, was waning. So could you argue that there are more powerful people that are using him as their puppet?
You know, political junkies think it's all about campaigns. They think it's all the tactics. So they think it's brilliant when Mayor Bloomberg has some trouble with his policies in African Americans that he can call on some African American politicians to endorse him. They love those kind of tactics. And they love the fact that when Joe Biden is in trouble, there seems to be somebody else they're shifting to. But that's not what it's really about. This gamesmanship is something the junkies enjoy. Most voters are just looking for someone who will represent them and be a credible candidate representing their views.
All right, panel, stand by. We are having Biden is being introduced right now. The victor in South Carolina. We will take it to you viewers live. Here we go.
For taking a little time out of your lives to come here and help us enhance the life of this great country. Thank you. I want to thank some of my colleagues over here, Alma Adams from North Carolina, Congresswoman from Charlotte, Senators Malloy and Kempson, who have been up and down with me for the last 2 days. Thank you. My daughters, Jennifer, Angela, thank you all so much. They have been as emotional about this last week experience as any two people I know, and I thank them so much. They've become so much a part of me. As many of you know, I studied history, used to teach history. And I've said often to those students that I used to teach who would question, why do we spend so much time reading and studying and discussing those things that happened way back yonder? And I would often say to them, we study history in order to understand the present and to prepare for the future. Because anything that's happened before can happen again. And tonight, as I stand here, I am thinking about some of that history. And I'm recalling something that's really attributed to a great Frenchman who came to this country to study our penal system and came to the conclusion that there was something magical about the United States of America. Now, in my research, I have not found that he actually said this or wrote this. But a lot of people give him credit for having said it. So if he didn't say it or didn't write it, then here's what you're getting from me. Alexis de Tocqueville is reputed to have said that the greatness of America lies in the fact that the goodness that exists in American people. And he supposedly said that if Americans ever cease to be good, America will cease to be great. This campaign, this year, is about the goodness of America. And we have as our candidate a real good man. As I talk to people in trying to understand the voting patterns that were taking place and understand what many people were saying, It all bound down to one fact. People were confusing goodness as weakness. You do not have to be bombastic in order to get your point across. You don't have to call people names in order to have your positions understood. You don't have to tell falsehoods in order to make headlines about your proposals. We have as our candidate a man who understands what it's like to be an American. None of us have had the same experiences. All of us are but the sum total of our experiences. And all of our experiences have not been pleasant. But all of our experiences in one form or another have been blessings. And we are blessed with a candidate who understands what it is to restore the goodness that exists in this great country. He will get us away. And so, ladies and gentlemen, you really did not come here to hear me. And I did not come here to speak. I came here to introduce and present to you a good man. A man who understands the fundamentalist fairness upon which this democracy is built, a man who will restore the goodness of this business and take us to where this country can be. Ladies and gentlemen, my good friend, one who I know, who you know, but most of all, who knows us.
Take nothing less than the suffering best. Do not obey, you must be forsake if you can pass the test. Just move on to a greater day. With just a little faith, if you put your mind to it, you can surely do it. Take nothing less than the suffering best. Do not obey, you must be forsake if you can pass the test. Just move on to a greater day. With just a little faith, if you put your mind to it, you can surely do it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. South Carolina. And my buddy Jim Clyburn, you brought me back. It's a man of enormous integrity. All of those who've been knocked down, counted out, left behind, this is your campaign. Just days ago, the press and the pundits had declared this candidacy dead. Now, thanks to all of you, the heart of the Democratic Party, we've just won, and we've won big because of you. And we are very much alive. Look, I told you all that you could launch a candidacy. You launched Bill Clinton, Barack Obama to the presidency. Now you launched our campaign on the path to defeating Donald Trump. This campaign is taken off. So join us. Go to joebiden.com, sign up, volunteer, contribute if you can, but we need you, we want you, and there's a place for you in this campaign. Folks, as we celebrate tonight here in Columbia, let me talk directly to Democrats across America, especially those who will be voting on Super Tuesday. This is the moment to choose the path forward for our party. This is the moment, and it's arrived. Maybe sooner than anyone guessed it would, but it's here. And the decisions Democrats make all across America in the next few days will determine what this party stands for, what we believe, and what we'll get done. If Democrats nominate me, I believe we can beat Donald Trump. Keep Nancy Pelosi in the House of Representatives as Speaker, and take back the United States Senate. So join us. My fellow Democrats across America, join us. If Democrats want to nominate someone who will build on Obamacare, not scrap it, take on the NRA and gun manufacturers, not protect them. Stand up and give the poor a fighting chance and the middle class get restored, not raise their taxes and keep the promises we make, then join us. And if the Democrats want a nominee who's a Democrat, a lifelong Democrat, a proud Democrat, an Obama-Biden Democrat, then join us. We have the option of winning big or losing big. That's the choice. We need to build on the coalition and legacy of the most successful president in our lifetime, Barack Obama. And the way we do this is by bringing Americans together of every race, ethnicity, gender, economic station, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, people of every stripe. Look, just like we did here in South Carolina. And like we can do across the entire country on Tuesday and beyond. Folks, win big or lose, that's the choice. Most Americans don't want the promise of revolution. They want more than promises. They want results. They want to give all Americans access to real opportunity, to be able to have affordable health care for all Americans, an environment with clean air and clean water, an education system that funds our schools, pays our teachers, makes community college free, a nation that will stand up to and beat the NRA. Reform our criminal justice system, root out institutional racism, mobilize the world against climate change. And an economy that works, rewards work, not just wealth. My dad used to say, Joey, a job's about a lot more than the paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about decency, it's respect. It's about your place in the community. It's being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay. For all our families, for all our communities. Because that's the right thing to do. That's what makes us Democrats. Talk is cheap. False promises are deceptive. And talk about revolution and changing anyone's life. We need real changes right now. Something I've done my whole career, and I'll do as president. So if this is an election to spend all our time in a battle for the soul of the Democratic Party, this is a battle for the soul of the United States of America. And we're in an incredibly perilous moment, as all of you know. Winning means uniting America, not sowing more division and anger. It means not only fighting, but healing the country. We have to beat Donald Trump and the Republican Party, but here's the deal. We can't become like them. We can't become like them. We can't have an never-ending war. Above all, it's time for America to get back up. The country is so ready. So ready. Once again, fight for the proposition that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights. We say it all the time, but we've never fully lived up to it. But we've never before, until this president, walked away from it. And it's the reason why Jim and I and all of us are in this. I believe with every fiber of my being that all men and women are created equal. You know, I saw it a few days ago in a town hall in Charleston, Jim. I spoke with Reverend Anthony Thompson, whose wife, Myra, was studying the words of her Bible with 8 other parishioners at Mother Emanuel 4.5 years ago. It was a weekly routine, reading Scripture and finding purpose and faith in God and in each other. And in an instant, hate, vengeance, white supremacy pierced that faith, and they were lost forever. But you know what I found the most remarkable thing in my career thus far? Remarkable about Reverend Thompson and the families of the Emanuel 9. It's through all that pain, all that grief, they forgave. Yes, sir. Yes. And here's the deal. In their forgiveness, they brought more change to South Carolina than any that's occurred over the previous 100 years. Think about it. The Confederate flag came down. Real change. That's why the Sunday after, Jill and I and my family, we came back to Mother Emanuel on Sunday services after the funeral of the victims. Because 6 weeks earlier, we had lost our son, Bo. And we needed to be healed, too. We need to be healed. I really mean this. We needed whatever they were exuding. And with every season that's passed, they've gotten up and found purpose to live life worthy of the ones they lost, worthy of the blessings to live in this remarkable country. We left here, having arrived in overwhelming pain, thinking we can do this. We can get through this. So I want to tell you, it's no small reason why I'm in this race. People like all of you here tonight, all around the country. The days of Donald Trump's divisiveness will soon be over. No. And as Jim, quoting de Tocqueville, he was right. This multi-ethnic country we call our democracy, America, it can't survive unless we focus on our goodness. We can build a more perfect union because the American people in the last 3.5 years have seen the alternative. No, I really mean it. Think about it. They've seen how utterly mean, selfish, lack of any sense of empathy or concern for anybody else. A president who not only has horrible policies, but the way he mocks and makes fun of other people. To all of you here in South Carolina, and especially Jim Clyburn, my friend, who lifted me in this campaign on his shoulders. That's right. But I mean all of you. Many I don't have time to name, all of you. We, Jill and I, our daughter Ashley, my son Hunter has been on the phone straight through for me. my brothers, my sisters, my 2 brothers, my sister, my 5 grandchildren, my 4 granddaughters who've come out on the campaign trail. We'll never forget what you've done for us. Well, we can say without fear of contradiction, the Bidens love you guys, man. The Bidens love you. That's real. And folks, now we need to stand behind Jamie Harrison, the next president of the United States, next senator of South Carolina. We need to send Joe Cunningham back to the House of Representatives. And all of us, all the Bidens, thank you. Thank you for everything you've done for us. So folks, so here's the deal. Let's get back up. We're decent, we're brave, we're resilient people. We can believe again. We're better than this moment. We're better than this president. So get up, take back our country. This is the United States of America. There's nothing beyond our capacity if we do it together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hush not.
That was Joe Biden's victory speech. Short, excited. He really sounded presidential, actually. One could argue. Now we have the Fox News decision desk can now project that Democratic Socialist Bernie Sanders will place second in the South Carolina Democratic presidential primary, losing to former Vice President Joe Biden, but beating billionaire Tom Steyer, who is currently in third place. Now I want to bring in Teslin Figaro, former Bernie Sanders campaign staffer. Teslin, your thoughts on Biden's win tonight?
Now, I always try to be fair. Thank you for having me, first of all. But I always try to be fair and objective. I think Joe Biden certainly has earned his place in South Carolina. You know, politicians have yet to learn that it does take more than 4 months or 4 years to really build a relationship, particularly with black voters. I also think that it shows that money cannot buy everything. Tom Steyer did not do as well as people thought. People thought that he would at least come in second. So I think it just shows that this primary is wide open. We still have a lot that will happen on Tuesday. But I think Joe Biden certainly earned this, and he deserves the win. He flat out won. I mean, it was a complete slaughter, obviously. So I don't think there's much we can spin about this other than the fact that he won it, plain and simple.
Teslin, what are your thoughts moving forward for the momentum that this will bring to Biden and for any depression at all for Bernie Sanders?
Well, we'll have to see. You know, there has been some issues with Joe Biden and his organizing all over the country. In fact, the Democrat Arkansas Party called him out on Twitter on last week saying that, hey, you haven't been by here to stop and see us. So I know he's had some organizing issues, just like he did in Nevada, Ohio, Iowa, as well as New Hampshire. So hopefully he'll be able to get some money. People actually on the ground, but don't know how much he can make up within 3 days. So we'll just have to see. I think Bernie Sanders will still come out ahead when it comes to delegates, but I think Mike Bloomberg certainly will do very, very well, better than what people expect. And we'll just have to see if this helps Joe Biden. But I do believe it will be a contested convention no matter what.
And in terms of South Carolina, I want to ask your input for the ground campaign. So Biden had redeployed 50 staffers from other states there, his totaling 60, and Sanders had 72. But as you pointed out, it was a slaughter. So looking back, do you think that was an inefficient use of Sanders' resources, or do you think that it will well serve him for his own personal surge?
No, he needed to do it. I mean, it's important. I've been advocating for money to be spent on black media, black staffers for a very long time. That's why I commend Tom Steyer. He actually employed more than anybody. He invested more than anybody on the ground. And I think that was good. That needed to happen because a lot of times the African-American community is completely skipped over. So Sanders should have done exactly what he did. But there's still arguments out there to say that he still invests more in other communities, more so than the African-American vote. So that is still something that needs to be improved, I think, by all of the candidates, including Joe Biden. He can't just take the vote for granted. But again, pointing back to the fact that Steyer hired everybody. They said that he even took unemployment down because he's hired so many folks. So it's not all about that. It really does just come down to who has built the long-standing relationships over and over repeatedly, and they just trust Joe Biden. And so that's simply what that was. And Tuesday will be really telling on how that plays out in other states like California.
And notwithstanding those wild cards, what is your personal prediction and analysis? Not your your personal preference, but what do you predict will happen on Super Tuesday and beyond for the Democratic primary?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up personal preference because I have none. I have no dog in this fight. I can actually give objective analysis. The reality of it is Senator Sanders will do well. I see him getting more delegates than anyone else. I do not see him being able to make it to the 1,991 that he needs in order to outright win the convention. If moderates do not come together quickly to consolidate their delegates and get behind either Joe Biden candidate, then it will certainly be contested. I just predicted it be contested regardless of however it happens. Bernie Sanders certainly won't be going down without a fight, and neither will his supporters. So we have some ugly times ahead, just to be quite honest. It's not to be negative, but it's just being very real that this thing is about to get turned on a dime, and things are going to get pretty ugly, unfortunately. But it's called a primary for a reason, and I think it will certainly give them some practice to go head-to-head with Donald Trump.
Final quick follow-up then. We can all kind of predict that carnage that frankly will occur if the Bernie bros don't get what they want. But do you think that there will be a final eventual coalescing around him if in fact he does get the plurality, not the 1991, but something more near there? Do you think that we will see the rest of the Democratic Party frankly falling in line behind him and throwing up their hands and accepting it? Or do you think there will in fact be a bitter fight to the end if that's what it looks like?
It'll be a bit of fighting because Senator Sanders, made a post on last week saying he had news for the Democrat establishment that they're not going to take him from him. Well, the Democrat establishment has news for Bernie Sanders. Everybody can give news to each other, and the news from the Democrat establishment is they're not going to hand it to him as easily as he thinks. So I think this is well understood from everybody on that side. To be honest with you, I don't see this, we'll just all finally get along. They do not want a declared Democratic socialist running against Donald Trump. And so things are very different than what they were in 2016. I joined this campaign not because I'm a socialist, but because it needed to be done. No one wanted to run against Hillary Clinton, and it was important to have another voice. Now it's very different. It's a very different time, a very different political environment. And so I just do not see them giving it to a Democrat socialist, and I believe they'll be doing everything to stop it. And he's going to have to earn those votes. You have to ask delegates, to join your team. Right. And he hasn't been the best with building those types of relationships, so we shall see.
Teslyn Figaro, thank you so much. Your analysis is always spot on. We're so grateful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
All right, gentlemen, so I want to talk to you about Elizabeth Warren, right? We haven't really talked about her too much tonight, and she has, earlier today at a campaign event in Texas, she said, swiping at Bernie Sanders, "This crisis demands more than a senator who has good ideas, but whose 30-year track record shows he consistently calls for things that fail to get done," to your point earlier, and consistently opposes things that nevertheless he fails to stop. So briefly, what's in store for Elizabeth Warren, and what does this attack on Bernie Sanders, who came in second tonight in South Carolina, mean?
It could mean that maybe she's going to throw her support sooner rather than later to somebody else, or maybe she'll stay on the sidelines and try and at least be a voice. It's hard to be a voice from the outside if you're not winning, and certainly she's not winning. However, if you join a campaign, you can become a surrogate, and all of a sudden you don't have the burden of being a candidate, but you still get the attention.
I think what Warren is doing is returning back to her roots. She earlier on in this race, she tried to try on the trappings of being a far left liberal. She used to be a Republican. She's always governing kind of from a moderate position, and I think now that she's realized that the Democratic Socialist does not fit her well, she's trying. You saw the last debate. She's trying to come back to the center and try to find a lane there as being the alternative to Bernie, to the left of Biden, to the right of Bernie, kind of that centrist, split the baby down the middle type of candidate. And I think that's her last Hail Mary going into Super Tuesday. But the latest polling has her losing her home state to Bernie right now. I don't know how long you can keep spinning the third and fourth and fifth place finishes into momentum. And there's really no justification at this point for her going forward, because if she loses her home state, it's very unlikely that there's any state she can win.
Right.
Look, I think she has a chance to win her home state. If she does, she sticks around for a little while. But again, without that, there is no reason for Elizabeth Warren to stay in the race. If she does upset Sanders in Massachusetts, she will be a thorn in his side for as long as she stays in the campaign. And I want to point out one other fact about the overall results from tonight that we haven't mentioned yet. After tonight, a phrase you're going to hear a lot is to this point in the primary campaign, Joe Biden has won more votes total than anybody else. Because when the votes are counted tonight, he will have surpassed anything that Bernie Sanders won in his first 3 states.
Volume and a quick check-in with 58% reporting. We have him at 133,283, 49.8%. Sanders following at 19.3%. Okay, so on to another, well, you could have argued underdog, but he's holding his own, and that's Mayor Pete. So we have him at 7.8% with 58% reporting. You know, Steyer, as we have mentioned all night, kind of purchased his way in, 13 million minimum with ad buys, social media, and television. Buttigieg has been in it to win it. What do you say about his performance tonight in South Carolina and what that means for him moving forward?
He's a rising star in the Democratic Party. This isn't his year, but that doesn't mean to say he can't be a player. The question is, if he's not a candidate, how is he going to play and stay relevant? Certainly, I believe we're probably going to see Mayor Pete at the convention in a prominent speaking role. And this is how you get your creds to live to fight another day. So far, he's handled himself on the campaign trail quite well for somebody who's a small town mayor, basically. So I think he lives to fight another day. The question is, what role does he seek to play?
This race reminds me a lot of the Democratic primary in 2004. You remember that race?
Sure.
Because it was an open race, but what you saw is the seeds of 2008, the seeds of 2012 being planted. And Mayor Pete reminds me a lot of John Edwards in that race. The pre-scandal, pre-scumbag John Edwards, but being that young, energetic, centrist, you know, someone that you can look at and really see a future for him in the party, whether it's his party chair, whether it's senator, whether it's being the, if, let's say that the Democrats do not win in 2020, he would enter 2024 as the prohibitive front runner. Every single other person in front of him in this race is in their late 70s to early 80s. So him being in his 30s and being, let's say, 42 by 2024, he will be the prohibitive front runner going into 2024. So he has every reason to stay in this race, get his message out there, continue to be the face and the future of the Democratic Party. Pete's 3 years older than me. So I can definitely see him leading this party for the next 20 or 30 years. I think he did the right thing getting in when he did.
I was just about to say, he's younger than I am. So he's the kind of person that always makes me feel bad about myself. I'm like, God, he's like already running for president? Like, what have I done with my life? You know?
He's that kid in school.
Yeah,
He's
exactly,
that kid.
right?
Yeah.
And so what Robert just said, though, he called him a centrist. But as we've talked about tonight, there's a difference between kind of your self-labeling and the policies that you've touted. So do you see from him a correction back to the centrist position moving forward, as Brad points out, as he kind of identifies his role between the party moving forward as a rising star?
Well, what I see is Mayor Pete is one. I also say Andrew Yang, by the way, this qualifies for. He accomplished what he wanted to in this race. He accomplished more than was expected. He's trying to find his voice. He's trying to figure out exactly what that voice is. He's not comfortable with a lot of the old school rhetoric of the Democratic Party from before he was born. He likes a lot of the basic values. But what he's done is position himself. He will be in future Democratic cabinets. He will be perhaps elected in some other roles. And he is going to be someone who will help define the Democratic Party after the 2020 election. We just don't know in what manner.
And also let's appreciate the fact that he has broken down the barriers for homosexual candidates in the LGBTQIAPK plus community, and that we don't care. No one talks about it. It's not the first thing that comes up, the fact that he is gay. And I think that's a really big step for our country, the fact that that's no longer an issue at all.
I want to read for you, gentlemen, the statement from the Trump campaign on tonight's primary. Once again, President Trump is the clear winner because not one of these candidates has a chance at beating him in November. The president will be running on his solid record of achievement for all Americans and will wipe the floor with whichever Democrat is unlucky enough to emerge. The South Carolina results just prove what a hot mess the Democratic primaries are, as the field once again descends into chaos heading into Super Tuesday. We don't know who the eventual nominee will be, but they are all the same, and their radical big government socialist policies will be on the Democratic ballot in November, no matter what. Briefly, your thoughts.
We live in a divided country. It's not, in my opinion, it's going to be a close race no matter who the nominee is. Having said that, Donald Trump enjoys something that none other nominee will have, and that is a record of accomplishment. The economy is doing fantastic. Even with the coronavirus threat, if our economy was not as healthy as it is, we'd be in a lot worse shape today, and we still don't know what the future will bring. But I do know this, Donald Trump it has the opposite effect of what Democrats have today. Donald Trump wasn't liked by the establishment, but he sure was liked by the grassroots. Donald Trump has delivered for the American people, all people, regardless of whether you supported Donald Trump or not. That's a fact of his record. Democrats don't have that, and he also has the power of the incumbency. Tough to beat.
I read it and it sounded. I read it in Darth Vader's voice because that's the way that it sounded. You do not have an opportunity to challenge the emperor. It's a ridiculous statement, and let's understand the following: President Trump called coronavirus a hoax, and someone died.
No. He didn't call the
regardless
he called the
of
Democrats.
Yeah.
He called the Democrats' response.
Let's understand what voters heard was he called the virus a hoax, and
So
someone
focusing on
died
his-
the
on his
next
comment
day.
for this.
Yes.
On his comment for this.
And on his comment for this, I think when President Trump makes these broad proclamations, the inevitability argument, that never plays well. We saw what happened to Hillary in 2016 when she tried to play the inevitability card. I think what he has to do is continue what he did in 16, beat the Bushes, get out there, have rallies, talk to voters, continue going to NASCAR, continue going to college football games, build up his positives, because even with his economic record that he has to run on, we also have to address the issue that eventually we have to talk about the debt and the deficit and what we're going to do going forward.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm hearing Justin, Tom Steyer ends White House bid. I was just about to ask you guys for your recommendations in a rapid fire, who needs to exit? And we have our answer right now. Tom Steyer has dropped out of the presidential race to make that announcement soon, to formalize it. So Scott, I'll start with you. Your thoughts on that? Who do you think he's going to put his precious billions toward? And who else needs to take the hint and get out too, briefly?
Well, everybody else should get out who doesn't have a chance to win, which means I would say Sanders and Biden. Some would argue Sanders, Biden, and Bloomberg are still competitive. But really, there's no reason for others to stay in the race, especially beyond Tuesday.
Prediction for who Steyer will put his money toward, if you have one?
I think he'll wait for a little bit and then be supportive of Joe Biden.
Okay, Brad.
Oh yeah, he's going to wait because he wants some drama.
Yeah.
He's not going to just give up and give it to Biden. He spent too much money and time. Plus, he wants to be courted. He wants the attention that's deserving, he feels, of the investment that he's made to date. Having said that, I agree with Scott. I think it's time for a lot of these folks to get out. They don't necessarily have to endorse right away, but they need to clear the field.
Like a Tulsi Gabbard, we haven't talked about her all night. She is still in. She had 2 people on the ground there. Would you suggest that Elizabeth Warren gets out?
Yes, absolutely. I think Warren should get out. I think Buttigieg should get out. And I think what they should do is decide after Super Tuesday who, if anybody, they want to endorse. And then I think it's time, and we've seen it in other campaigns, where Joe Biden is at home and all of a sudden you see a flurry of people coming to see him and cut their deal. What is their next step? How are they going to be helpful to get Joe Biden as the nominee?
Do you also think everyone should drop out before Super Tuesday, or is there any part of you thinking that we need to wait a little bit, or at this point it's like everyone needs to go?
Well, I actually think Warren should stay in the race, primarily because the votes that she draw away from Sanders' votes. So if you're the Biden campaign, if you're talking to Warren, you want her to stay in through Super Tuesday, because the more that Sanders has to compete in Massachusetts or has to compete for some of the liberal votes in California, it definitely helps. But as far as Klobuchar and Buttigieg and now Steyer, they just simply put don't have a pathway to victory. There's no polling showing Pete Buttigieg winning a single Super Tuesday state. There's no polling showing Amy Klobuchar winning any states going forward. So
let me ask you guys then, okay, so Steyer is dropping out the night of the South Carolina primary, yet he spent upwards of $13 million there, and he got 11.6% of the vote with 62% reporting. So where would his votes have gone toward? And at this point now, was he just a stick in the water? What do you say? The rock in the water? What? Yeah. A stick in the mud? Yeah, right.
Well, you've been on for a long time. Okay.
Wasting his position. Now looking back, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, he's a businessman. He made this decision to drop out before the first vote was cast this morning. He knew what was coming. He was prepared for it. He took his shot. It didn't work out. And as you said, he's living his best life right now.
He's living his best
couple
life.
days. And so, yeah, and he probably brought a few people to the polls that wouldn't have come otherwise. But whether he was disappointed with it or whatever else, he made his decision. He's going to move on, and now he is going to want to be courted and move forward.
Do you think Mayor Pete is the angriest tonight, and in hearing this, that he thought maybe Steyer stole his votes away from him, his support?
Well, he can be angry all he wants, but the fact of the matter is this isn't the year for Mayor Pete. Right. It's clear. He should be very proud of how well he's done up until this point, especially from where he's come from. He came from out of left field, literally, and he's done quite well. But he has to know when to exit and exit gracefully, and then figure out what is in his best interest politically in order to keep before the American public in a way that is going to help him in future races.
You about to?
Well, no, I was going to say the model for all of these candidates is actually Representative Clyburn. He gave an endorsement when it mattered, right, when it was very significant in the campaign, and it was he was as much a winner tonight as Joe Biden. Right. And so Mayor Pete, Tom Steyer, Senator Klobuchar, Senator Warren, they need to find a way to exit gracefully at a time when they can have an impact. That, for most of them, it will be after Super Tuesday, maybe before the big events on March 17th.
All right, I have a question for you guys. So back to the Trump and the sort of overarching theme here. Now, in the general election in 2016, Trump carried South Carolina with 54.9%, and we know that Hillary got 40.67%. So is that a comfortable margin in 2020? And what do you foresee happening, just to wrap this all up, in South Carolina in the general, based on what we saw tonight?
Well, you know, historically, since the 60s, South Carolina has gone Republican, but for Jimmy Carter, who was the son of the South. So, you know, tonight's a Democratic night when we're talking about South Carolina. I happen to believe South Carolina is going to be reliantly red in November.
And if Bernie's on the ticket especially, will it be even more red than we've seen in the past?
Well, I think that goes into the previous question about when these candidates should get out, because let's understand that if you have, let's say, Biden at the top of the ticket, then Jamie Harrison's going to run a very strong campaign for Senate. You could see that number get a lot closer and go up into toss-up territory. We're seeing that throughout the South, where you're seeing, because of rising African-American populations, more people, refugees coming from New York going down south to where there's lower taxes. You can actually have a house and a family and a yard. So you're seeing the states become less and less red. But if Bernie's at the top of the ticket, it's going to be crimson. And that's going to be the majority.
What's redder than red?
Yeah, it's going to be the majority of the map will look that way, simply because Bernie does not have those coattails to be able to bring other Democrats across the line. And I think if we do turn the convention into a bloodbath, as many people have said, where you are having, you know, Chicago 1968, so the National Guard calling in and fires being set all over the place, then yeah, it's probably not going to be the best look for the convention. So for that reason, I think some of the other candidates, the Mayor Pete's, the Steyers, the Klobuchars, have to look into getting out sooner rather than later, and trying to have the come to Jesus, come together moment now, and not wait for Bernie to get an insurmountable lead and tank the entire party for a generation.
I think South Carolina is solidly in the Republican column, and in fact, I think it's fair to say that almost all of the Trump states from 2016 are going to be in the Republican column. The question marks, as things stand right now, will be places we talked about a lot 4 years ago: Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Those states will be in play. If the Democrats come out divided, the Trump campaign will also be talking about Minnesota and expanding the map and a few other places. But I don't expect a big change in the electoral map unless something, you know, really dramatic changes in the nation between now and November.
All right, for our final closing, I just want to give each of you the opportunity to share any thoughts that you haven't been able to articulate yet tonight, either projections for what we have coming down the pike or analysis about what just happened in South Carolina. The floor is yours.
I would say, if I were advising President Trump, get to Florida and get to it in the next couple of days before Super Tuesday, and do some one or two rallies and maybe a substantive policy event in Florida. I would do that.
I think what voters have to look at for the Democratic Party in particular is the fact that President Trump has been the #1 Bernie bro for the last 5 years. He has consistently campaigned for Bernie. He has led the charge saying the Democrats are going to try to steal this from Bernie. And he was willing to get impeached to stop Joe Biden from being the nominee. So if you, on the one hand, have one candidate that the president is actively campaigning for and another one that he would risk jail time to campaign against, you know exactly where Democratic primary voters need to be focusing on.
I would say that the thing that we're losing sight of in all of this is the House of Representatives is likely to remain in Democratic hands after this election. but it's far from certain. And the types of voters who will decide are going to be very uncomfortable with the presidential nominees from both parties. Those suburban voters who gave the Democrats the House 2 years ago are going to be looking at this and saying, I don't know what to do. So the race for the House of Representatives is going to come down to a bunch of moderate districts that Democrats won a couple of years ago, and going to be fascinating to see how that plays out in the midst of this presidential battle.
All right, viewers, you heard it here first. That concludes our special coverage of the South Carolina primary. Thank you to my amazing all-star political panel, Scott, Robert, and Brad, for joining me. Be sure to tune in again this Tuesday for live Super Tuesday analysis right here on Fox Nation. I'm Emily Compagno. Thank you for watching. Have a great night.